In 1954, a tool and die foreman in Flint, Michigan named Walter Brennan earned $4,800 a year at the Buick plant. He raised 4 sons. He paid off a 2-story house on Saginaw Street in 9 years. He put $35 a week into a passbook savings account at the local credit union and never missed a deposit. He drove the same Plymouth for 16 years. And every Friday night, after he cashed his check at the corner grocery, he sat his oldest boy down at the kitchen table and walked him through the money. Not as a lesson, as a transmission. A set of rules drilled into him by his own father during the Depression, now being passed forward like a trade. By the time that boy turned 18, he could run a household budget in his head. He never carried a credit card balance in his life. He died in 2019 with a paid-off house and $312,000 in the bank. He had worked as a high school shop teacher. They raised their sons differently, not with allowances or speeches, but with rules carved into them by the Depression and tempered by the war. Those rules built a generation of men who bought homes on single incomes, retired without anxiety, and never once financed a vacation. We abandoned every one of them the moment the credit card found the American mailbox. We did not lose this knowledge by accident. We were sold a replacement, and we took it. Number 19 cost a father in the 1950s exactly nothing and saved his son an estimated $1,400 across his first decade of working life, and a 2017 study at the Wharton School confirmed why it still works. Number 12 was so unfashionable by 1985 that financial magazines openly mocked the men who still practiced it until the 2008 crash made every one of those mocking voices go quiet. And number 3, the single rule that 1950s fathers enforced more strictly than any other, the rule passed down without exception from the workbench to the kitchen table, is now being taught in elite private wealth seminars for fees that would have made those fathers walk out of the room. These 25 rules were not about being cheap. They were about raising a man who could not be broken by a layoff, a recession, or a single bad decision. They were the difference between a son who built something and a son who spent his life paying interest on what he wished he had built. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 forgotten money rules fathers drilled into their sons in the 1950s that raised an entire generation of debt-free men. Number 25, the Friday night cash walk. Every payday, the father took his son with him to cash the check, not to the bank, to the grocer, the credit union, or the company paymaster. The boy watched the bills come out. He watched them get counted. He watched them get divided before they ever entered the house. By age 10, a son in 1955 understood exactly what his father earned and exactly where it went. There were no secrets. There was no shame. The money was real because he had seen it. A 1958 survey of working-class fathers in Cleveland found that 78% had taken their sons on the cash walk by age 12. The practice vanished by 1975 when direct deposit replaced the paper check. The boy who never saw the cash never quite believed it existed. Money you cannot see is money you cannot respect. That was the whole reason for the walk. Number 24. The workbench lecture. Every father had a workbench. Every workbench had a lesson. In Akron, Ohio, in 1953, a father would call his son into the garage on a Saturday morning, hand him a broken radio, and say, "We are not buying a new one. We are fixing this one. The new one costs $24. The tubes cost 60 cents. The boy learned soldering, wiring, and patience in the same afternoon. He also learned that a man who could fix things owned his own time. By 1960, the average American boy raised in a working-class household had performed an estimated 200 home repairs before his 18th birthday. By 2000, that number had dropped to under 20. The workbench did not just teach repair. The workbench taught that the world was not disposable. The lesson was never the radio. The lesson was the boy's hands. Number 23. The two-envelope allowance. When a son began earning pocket money, like a paper route, lawn mowing, or bagging groceries, the father handed him two envelopes, one marked Spend, one marked Save. The split was not negotiable, half in each, always. A boy in Pittsburgh in 1956 earning $3 a week from a paper route put $1.50 in each envelope without thinking about it. By age 18, that envelope had grown to $312. It became the down payment on his first car. The father did not lecture. He did not explain compound interest. He just enforced the split until it became a reflex that lasted 60 years. The allowance was not money. The allowance was muscle memory. Number 22. The forbidden phrase. In a 1950s household, a son who said "I want" without first saying "I have earned" met silence. Not anger. Silence. The phrase "I want it" was understood to be incomplete. The complete sentence was, "I have earned it and I want it." A father in Buffalo, New York in 1957 reportedly refused to acknowledge any request from his sons that did not begin with the earning. The boys learned within a week. They never forgot. By the time those sons left home, the connection between earning and spending had been welded shut. The credit card industry would spend the next 40 years trying to pry it back open. In many of those men, it never did. It was not discipline. It was wiring, the wiring held for life. Number 21. The Saturday morning ledger. Every Saturday morning before breakfast, the father opened a small green account book and recorded the week. A factory worker in Gary, Indiana in 1955 logged every expense: $8.40 for groceries, $1.20 for the church envelope, $2 to savings, 35 cents for streetcar fare. His sons sat at the table and watched. By age 14, the oldest could perform the same calculation on his own pay. The book was not a budget. The book was the truth made visible. There was nowhere for a dollar to hide. Not in coffee, not in newspapers, not in the small bakery stops on the way home from work. A 1962 University of Michigan study found that men raised in ledger households carried 40% less consumer debt as adults than peers from non-ledger households. The book was the cheapest financial education ever invented. It cost 15 cents. The ledger was not paperwork. The ledger was the moral compass of the family. Number 20. The used car rule. A son did not buy a new car, ever. Not for his first job, not for his wedding, not after his first promotion. A father in Toledo, Ohio in 1958 sat his son down before the boy bought his first vehicle and said, "A new car loses $400 the moment you drive it home. You will work 2 months to pay for that loss. You will work those months for nothing." The son bought a used 1953 Ford for $385 instead of a new 1958 Chevrolet for $2,200. He drove it for 9 years. The savings, invested in a passbook account at 4%, became $2,100 by the time he was 30. That $2,100 became the down payment on his first house. The new car was not a reward. The new car was a tax on impatience. Number 19. The tool inheritance. A father did not buy his son a starter set of tools. He gave him his old ones. A returning GI in St. Louis, Missouri in 1952 handed his 14-year-old boy a hammer, 2 screwdrivers, a wood plane, and a hand drill, all bought during the Depression and all still working. Replacements would have cost $34 in 1952 and over $400 in 2024. By 2017, behavioral economists at the Wharton School were studying what they called inheritance equity, the long-term financial advantage of receiving functional assets rather than starter goods. The 1950s, father had engineered around the need for a study by simply handing his boy what he already owned. The tool was not a gift. The tool was a head start, measured in decades. Number 18, the no restaurant rule. A working-class family in 1955 did not eat in restaurants, not on birthdays, not on anniversaries, not on payday. A father in Camden, New Jersey, calculated in 1954 that one restaurant meal for a family of 6 cost $7.40, more than 2 full days of his after-tax wages. He refused on principle. The mother cooked, the boys helped. The savings, roughly $380 annually, went into the home down payment account. By 1965, that family owned their house outright. The neighbors who ate out twice a month rented for life. It was not deprivation. It was the math being honored without exception. Number 17. The Sunday suit rule. A man owned one good suit. He wore it on Sundays, at weddings, and at funerals. He maintained it. He pressed it. He brushed it. He did not replace it until it could no longer be repaired. A postal worker in Hartford, Connecticut, bought a wool suit in 1949 for $42. He wore that suit until 1968. 19 years. The replacement cost across that span, at the rate his neighbors replaced theirs, would have been over $300. The savings went into his son's college fund. Both boys became the first college graduates in the family. The suit did not just save money. The suit funded a generation forward. The suit was not vanity. The suit was a tuition payment in disguise. Here is what the financial magazines never explain. The 1950s. Father was not financially sophisticated. He had no degree in economics. He had read no books on personal finance. What he had was a nervous system from before 1929. He had watched his own father lose everything in the Depression. He had watched his uncles wait in soup lines. He had carried a rifle through Europe or the Pacific and come home to a country he did not entirely trust to remain prosperous. So he raised his sons the way a man raises children when he believes the world can collapse without warning. That belief was not paranoia. That belief was memory. The rules he drilled into his boys were not financial advice. They were inoculations. The American economy spent the next 60 years working very hard to convince those sons that the inoculations were no longer necessary. Some believed it. Most paid for that belief in interest. Number 16. The Christmas cash limit. A father in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 1957 set a hard cash limit for Christmas spending, $40 for the entire family of 5. He stuck to it. The gifts were modest: a pocket knife, a wool scarf, a book, a baseball mitt. The sons did not feel deprived. They felt seen. Their father had thought about each of them specifically within a budget that would not damage the family. By contrast, in 2023, the average American household spends $923 on Christmas, much of it financed on credit cards, still being paid off in March. The 1957 father understood something the modern household has forgotten. A gift bought on credit is not a gift. It is a debt with a ribbon on it. The limit was not stinginess. The limit was love that refused to mortgage February. Number 15, the payday deposit. The first stop after cashing the check was the savings window, not the grocery, not the hardware store, the savings window. A father in Denver, Colorado in 1956 deposited $4 every Friday before he bought a single thing. Over 40 years of working life, that $4 a week, at the era's typical 4% interest, compounded into roughly $19,000. That $19,000 was the difference between a comfortable retirement and a worried one. His sons watched him make that deposit every week of their childhoods. All four made the same deposit when they began their own working lives. The pattern moved from one generation to the next without a single conversation about why. The deposit was not a strategy. The deposit was an inheritance being witnessed in real time. Number 14, the repaired shoe. A son's shoes were resoled, not replaced. A father in Boston, Massachusetts in 1953 took his son's school shoes to a cobbler on Tremont Street twice a year. Cost per resole, 75 cents. Cost of a new pair, $4.50. The savings across one boy's school years, roughly $40, became the boy's confirmation suit. The cobbler was not a luxury. The cobbler was a financial institution. By 1980, the cobbler had largely vanished from American towns. The shoe became disposable. So did the dollar that bought it. The shoe was not the savings. The shoe was the proof that maintenance beats replacement. Number 13, the garage mechanic. A 1950s father did not pay another man to do what he could learn to do himself. A factory hand in Youngstown, Ohio in 1954 changed his own oil, replaced his own brake pads, rebuilt his own carburetor, and taught his son to do all three before the boy turned 16. Estimated annual savings on auto maintenance alone were $180. Across 40 years of vehicle ownership, that totaled over $7,000 in 1954 dollars. In today's currency, that is more than $80,000. The garage was not a hobby. The garage was a second income, paid out in money not spent. It was not a side job. It was a refusal to outsource a man's own competence. Number 12, the whole life insurance question. A father in Charlotte, North Carolina in 1955 sat his son down before the boy bought his first insurance policy and walked him through the math of whole life versus term insurance. The whole life salesman had quoted $11 a month. The term policy cost $3 a month. The father showed him that the $8 difference, invested at 4% over 40 years, would grow to 3 times the whole life cash value. The boy bought term insurance. By 1985, financial magazines were openly mocking the men still loyal to whole life policies. By 2008, the crash erased trillions in cash value accounts. Policyholders had been told those accounts were safe. The mocking voices went quiet. The 1955 father had run the numbers without a calculator. He arrived at the answer the entire industry would only admit to half a century later. The math did not change. Only the people willing to look at it changed. Number 11, the 3-bid rule. Before any expense over $50, a father in Newark, New Jersey in 1957 demanded 3 written estimates: 3 roofers, 3 plumbers, 3 furnace repairmen. He taught his sons the rule before either boy was old enough to need it. The lowest bid was rarely the best. The highest bid was rarely the worst. The middle bid, weighed against the man giving it, was usually correct. Across his lifetime, The father estimated the three-bid rule saved him over $4,200, roughly the cost of his entire mortgage principal. The sons applied the rule to every house they ever owned. Neither was ever overcharged for a major repair. Not once. The bid was not paperwork. The BID was a man refusing to be talked into a number he had not tested. Number 10. The credit refusal. The first credit card mailed to a 1950s household typically arrived in the late 1950s or early 1960s. A father in Trenton, New Jersey in 1959 received his first Diners Club offer in the mail. He read it. He looked at his son. He tore it in half and dropped both halves in the kitchen wastebasket. He said one sentence, "If I do not have the money today, I do not have the money." That sentence became the financial constitution of the household. Both sons reached middle age without ever carrying a credit card balance. The refusal was not philosophical. The refusal was practiced over and over every time a new offer arrived until the refusal became the natural answer. The torn card was not rebellion. The torn card was a household saying no in the only language the credit industry understood. Number 9. The kept receipt. Every receipt, no matter how small, came home in the father's wallet and went into a tin box on the kitchen counter. At the end of each month, the father and the oldest son sorted them. Groceries, hardware, medical, transportation. Each pile was tallied. Each tally was compared to the previous month. A father in Cincinnati, Ohio, in 1956, found through this practice that the family was spending $3.20 a month on small bakery purchases, coffee cake, donuts, sweet rolls, that no one really remembered eating. He cut the category to zero the next month. The savings went to savings. The boy learned that no expense is too small to count, because all of them count together. It was not bookkeeping, it was the truth, removed from memory and made physical. In 1955, the median American household saved 11% of its income. In 2023, that number was 3.4%. The income did not collapse. The discipline did. We did not become poorer. We became convinced that saving was the activity of the timid, and spending was the activity of the confident. The father in the 1950s understood the opposite. Spending without savings was not confidence. Spending without savings was a man on a tightrope without a net, telling everyone watching how brave he was. The fall always came. It still does. Number 8. The garden plot. Even in the suburbs, a father in the 1950s kept a vegetable garden. Tomatoes, beans, squash, cucumbers. A father in Levittown, New York, in 1958 spent $3.50 on seeds in spring and harvested an estimated $94 in produce by October. The boys weeded. The boys watered. The boys learned that food came from work, not from a paycheck. The garden was not nostalgia. The garden was a hedge against grocery inflation. It paid in vegetables when the dollar got thinner. The garden was not a hobby. The garden was a second pantry the family had built with its own hands. Number 7. The quiet wealth rule. A father in the 1950s did not display money. The well-off plumber drove the same modest car as the struggling postman. The successful small business owner wore the same Sunday suit as the assembly line worker. In 1956, a father in St. Paul, Minnesota, had nearly $40,000 in liquid assets, the equivalent of $500,000 today, and his neighbors had no idea. He told his son once, "If they know what you have, they will expect things from it. The fastest way to lose money is to look like you have it." The son carried that rule into a 40-year career. He died wealthy and unbothered. Wealth that announces itself attracts taxes, lawsuits, and relatives. Quiet wealth attracts none of them. Number 6. The repair before replace. In the 1950s, nothing in a home was thrown out until repair had been attempted. A toaster that stopped working went onto the workbench, not into the trash. A father in St. Louis, Missouri, in 1955, estimated that 70% of his household appliance failures were repaired rather than replaced. The savings, across a single decade, exceeded $400. That was a year of college tuition at a state school in 1965. The repair was not always successful, but the attempt was non-negotiable. The boy who watched his father attempt the repair learned that the first answer to a broken object was never a new one. The broken thing was not waste. The broken thing was an invitation to think before spending. Number 5. The 20-year mortgage. A father in the 1950s took the shortest mortgage he could afford, not the longest, the shortest. A teacher in Albuquerque, New Mexico in 1954 chose a 20-year mortgage on his $9,800 home over the available 30-year option. The monthly payment was $14 higher. Across the life of the loan, that $14 a month saved him over $3,200 in interest. He paid the house off in 1974. He retired 10 years later with a paid-off home and a modest pension. The pension covered his needs comfortably. The largest expense most Americans carry into retirement was no longer his expense. The shorter mortgage was not a stretch. The shorter mortgage was a man buying his future from his present. Number 4. The single-income discipline. A working-class household in the 1950s ran on one income, even when the wife could have earned a second. The reason was not gender. The reason was margin. A father in Spokane, Washington in 1957 explained it to his sons. He said, "If we both work and we spend both incomes, we have 2 jobs and no cushion. If I work and we spend mine, we have a cushion and a backup." When his factory laid off 600 men in 1962, his wife took a part-time job for 9 months. The family did not borrow a dollar. The household survived because it had been engineered for one income. The second income, when it became necessary, was the rescue, not the lifestyle. The single income was not tradition. The single income was an insurance policy with no premium. Number 3. The drilled catechism. Every father in the 1950s had a money catechism, a set of phrases he repeated to his sons until they became reflex. If you cannot pay cash, you cannot afford it. Save first, spend what is left. A bargain you did not need is not a bargain. The interest works for the lender, not for you. A father in Baltimore, Maryland in 1955 had 9 such phrases that his sons could recite by age 10. The repetition was relentless. It was also the entire point. Drilled phrases became drilled behavior. Drilled behavior became identity. By 2018, elite private wealth seminars were charging 4-figure fees to teach what amounted to the same 9 phrases. The 1950s father had taught them for free at the kitchen table before the meatloaf got cold. The phrase was not a saying. The phrase was a son's bones being shaped one repetition at a time. Number 2, the tested inheritance. Before a son left home, his father tested him. In Providence, Rhode Island in 1958, a father handed his 18-year-old boy $200 in cash and said, "This is for the next month. Rent, food, transportation, everything. If it is gone in 3 weeks, you will not eat in the 4th. Do not ask me for more." The son made it last. He had to. The test was not cruelty. The test was the only honest way to know if the years of drilling had taken hold. A boy who could survive that month was a man who could survive a layoff, a recession, or a marriage that hit a hard year. The test was the graduation. There was no diploma. The diploma was the empty wallet on day 28th, with rent paid and 3 days of groceries still in the icebox. The test was not a punishment. The test was the proof that the rules had become him. Number 1, spend less than you earn. That is the whole rule. No envelope, no ledger, no workbench lecture. None of the 24 rules above mean anything without this one at the center. Walter Brennan earned $4,800 a year in 1954. He spent $3,900. The $900 difference defended every single week without exception, paid off his house, funded his savings account, put 4 sons through high school in clean clothes, and left his wife a paid-off home and a passbook account when he died. There was no system. There was a gap. He held the gap open for 40 years, and the gap built everything. Modern personal finance has produced thousands of books, podcasts, courses, and apps trying to find a more sophisticated answer than this one. There is no more sophisticated answer. Every other rule on this list exists only to defend this one. It is the most boring sentence in the English language. It is also the sentence that built every debt-free man this country ever produced. None of these rules required a calculator, a credit score, or a financial advisor. They required a father willing to sit a boy down at a kitchen table and tell him the truth about money, without softening it, without postponing it, without pretending it would somehow take care of itself. The men who raised the debt-free generation were not financial geniuses. They were men who had seen what happened when the rules were ignored. They refused to let their sons learn the same lesson the same way. They taught their boys to be unafraid of the small word no. No to the new car, no to the credit card, no to the restaurant on a Tuesday, no to the larger house, the second vacation, the watch they could not pay cash for. Every no was a yes to something else, a paid-off mortgage, a quiet retirement, a son who would never need to be rescued. We called those fathers strict. We called them old-fashioned. We called them out of touch. They were none of those things. They were free. And the boys they raised became the last American generation to own their lives outright.